Dear members and friends of the Impact Scholar community, wow, it's been a year since the Impact Scholar community was founded by Sylvia, Garima, and Nicholas, and there have been many inspiring events and stories. We want to celebrate the community's first birthday with you by having an impact conversation with Judith and Garima Sharma. Thank you both for agreeing to participate in the conversation. Instead of spending a lot of time on introductions, we want to use this opportunity to thank both of you for your efforts in launching the community. Judith, thank you so much for your support as previous ONE Division Chair in launching the community. Garima, thank you for all your effort in founding this community and getting it off the ground. And from us volunteers, we especially want to thank you for being so generous with guidance, inspiration, and feedback throughout the writing of the Impact Scholar stories. In this conversation, we want to learn more about your experience with a focus on impact, your experience with the Impact Scholar community, and your vision for the future of Impact Focus. We have prepared a few questions and are excited to see where this conversation takes us. Let's start.
I just want to thank you again for that, such a kind introduction. And it has been such a pleasure to work with you on this effort. And I'm so excited to talk to Judith today. She's inspired me in so many ways. So I just want to thank you for that opportunity. I would love to hear the first question from you because I feel like you've been doing this for a while and I can sort of piggyback on that. So in your mind, how has this impact debate changed over the last 10 years?
Sure, yes, I can take this question and probably reflect it back to you in a minute. Likewise, from my side, thank you very much, Katrin, and specifically thank you a lot, Garima, and your co-founders, Sylvia and Nicholas, for getting this started. And I think what caught my attention about the Impact Scholarly community is really related to the question about the impact debate and how it has changed over the last 10 years. I think when I started my PhD, we still had very much a mindset that young scholars should only focus on publication and that there was no place for impact or activism or almost real life, in the way of kind of making that direct connection to management. But then as I matured through my years, becoming my postdoc, assistant professor, I started to hear more and more the complaints, that there was this kind of disconnect between management scholarship and management practice, maybe the idea that we're all in our ivory towers too much. And I felt that for sustainability, this disconnect really is not needed, right? It's the wrong kind of disconnect to have because the issues are so urgent and they have become much more urgent over the last 10 years now that we have this sort of carbon budget that will run out for sure by 2030, that we really need to bend the curve. We have massive biodiversity loss that people are now starting to notice, including companies. So when this idea came up about the Impact Scholar community, I latched onto it right away because I felt, yes, this is what we need. We need scholars who care about these topics, who are going to research these topics, but not just research them for the sake of researching them, but really for the sake of having an impact.
Yeah.
For you, how did this come about?
Yeah, so I love the word latched onto because I'm going to latch onto your hope and your positive outlook of how the debate has changed. And, I agree with it. I was one of those, sort of complaining and rumbles of, wanting change in the academic community. I often sort of tell this story about this symposium I was at Academy, and it wasn't ONE, but I'm not going to say which division, but I'm sort of, it's a junior faculty consortium, and I'm sitting sitting there and I asked a question about impact to the panelist of senior scholars, and I was completely dismissed and shot down in the sense of, this is not a concern I should even have as a junior scholar. And now I go to the academy and ONE and SIM and, are sort of leading this conversation around, what we can do as an academic community to create impact. And I think social media has really helped us, over Twitter and LinkedIn, and, you can really engage in this debate and inspire each other so that, sometimes this impact journey can also feel lonely. And I think it's just so helpful to do that. And you talk about the recent events. I think this current pandemic has also really showed us that we as scholars, we can just sit by the sidelines. We have to jump in, and all the commentaries and essays that Judith, you have written, and I've had a chance to write some, that really show that as sustainability scholars, we can sort of lead the way. So I want to sort of start with that big, bright hope, but I also want to acknowledge, and this is a conversation Sylvia, Nicholas, and I would often have as we were thinking about what this community means, is that are we, do we also need a reality check, in the sense that our early career scholars, some of them going into the job market, we have to acknowledge that a lot of systems around us are still very traditional in the sense that they don't appreciate impact. So I just want to say that as well, that there are really exciting niche conversations like Impact Scholar Community and RRBM, but there's also this larger institutional environment. And I think one of the things that brings that to light is the job market. And I don't know, Judith, if you have any thoughts on what that means for how an impact scholar sort of shows up in the job market and what that means.
Well, I mean, luckily, I haven't been on the job market now for a while, at least not as a junior person anymore. I was there a lot in the beginning, but not anymore. I think you bring up a really excellent point. In the end, to be an impactful scholar, you have to be both a scholar as well as the impact part, right? And it's well known that our number one currency that translates worldwide is the publications, and especially publications in top tier journals. You can take that to any university and say, look at what I've done. Here's my value, if you like, and they can sort of read into that and say, okay, but this is a person we want to give a job to. And I think in the past, it would definitely have been a disadvantage if someone was too impact focused and not enough on the publications focused. And I think many systems and incentive systems around that are still a little bit like that. But I'm also a bit hopeful because I do see some change here. We have, you mentioned RRBM, for example, the Responsible Research in Business and Management, and they have this Dare to Care, I think, scholarship going on now, right, for I believe it's thesis-based research. Mm-hmm. We have people like Andy Hoffman who are writing books like The Engaged Scholar or Management as a Calling, bringing this notion of purpose into management and bringing this notion of engagement from faculty, into the space. And I think what has changed, even over the last 10 years, is really also a huge social shift. So outside of academia, if we see the Fridays for Future movement, if we see the Me Too movement, if we see the Black Lives Matter movement, and even before that, a little bit Arab Spring and things like this, now with COVID, we're seeing lots of young people protesting things here and there. I think we've gotten to a stage where we can no longer just assume that we can kind of forget about these things. I think they're increasingly coming to the surface, to the point where politicians have to deal with them, to the point that business has to deal with them, which means scholars also should deal with them because this is affecting the world that we are studying. And at the same time, I'm seeing that reflected in certain spaces, like in the UK, for example, universities are now partly being assessed on impact, right? The latest FT ranking questionnaire that somehow came across my desk was asking about the carbon footprint of universities, right? And also they're now reevaluating the journals that go into the FT50 for impact specifically. So I think with these sort of shifts, some of the institutional shifts are also starting to go along. I mean, we know that academia tends to be a bit sort of an old-fashioned dinosaur. It takes a long time to change, but I think change is happening, and in order to stay relevant, we have to change, right? I always pose the question the other way around to my own university, management and leadership, and say, what do we as a university have to offer the people that are protesting on the street as teenagers right now? Will they want to come into our program? Can we attract the Friday to Future students? Will they be willing to come to our program? Are we offering them the type of teaching that helps them bring these skills of sustainability, for example, into management? And if not, then how do we do that? I mean, we might lose relevance, right? I think it's the key thing. If they don't want to come to us, they'll go to a competitor university who is taking care of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you're being that voice, in your school. And I really feel like that's what, we're in such a privileged position in academia, and we really need to be that voice. And, even in hiring committees, being that voice at the table saying, no, impact matters. I think it's just so important in addition to this institutional change. I also want to add to the list of positive changes that you said, something around, sort of journal publications too. And I feel, you talk about academia being a little bit antiquated. I think a reviewing and journal process is also extremely antiquated. And, so what gives me hope is seeing some of the innovations that some journals are doing around shortening their time toward publication, bringing in practitioners' voice into defining the problem and defining the solution. And, Journal of Business Venturing Insight has this rapid response research where I believe it's a matter of weeks from coming together to publishing the article. Many other journals are sort of following that idea of this nimble scholarship is the phrase I often sort of hear. So this idea that, if we have done there's a lot of existing research insights, evidence-based insights, and how can we bring it together to respond to an immediate issue like the one we're facing right now around this global pandemic and the impending crises, others. So I do want to add that innovation around some journals are doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I really love this phrase, nimble scholarship. I hadn't heard it before, but it really reminds me, we recently have a new school of computer science. We're just a business school, so adding this school is very strange for us. And I spoke to some of my new colleagues there, and they don't even do journal publications. Their field moves so fast that the best you can hope for is a conference paper. And if it gets into the conference, it's basically viewed as a publication, because the next month or 2 months later, somebody will already have discovered something new that needs to be brought to the academic community so that they can build on it. And when you think about those types of disciplines, also in the natural sciences, the turnaround can be extremely fast in some of those journals, whereas some of my papers have taken 3 years to come to publication, and that was after 7 years of doing research, before even getting to the journal process. So that is too long. We can't spend 10 years getting our research out there when we only have 10 years left to solve climate change, for example. And so really happy to know that some of these journals are doing that. And I think even in journals like the Academy of Management, we have Academy of Management Discoveries that really tries to focus more on this phenomenon-driven approach, focusing on the issue, right, rather than maybe theories or worrying about theoretical contribution. I've seen recently a lot of calls for papers on grand challenges and these kinds of themes, right? So I think journals are also recognizing that this is important, right? That they have relevance, because otherwise they become increasingly less relevant. And maybe partly as a result of that, we have seen a lot of sustainabilities rise up in the impact factors and rankings, because people care about reading them and citing that research and moving it forward. So maybe this time I will start with the question for Garima, because you were one of the initiators of this impact scholar community. I mean, how did you guys come up with this idea and how did you become involved in it? I'm curious to know.
Sure. So I will start with, emphasizing that this is really Sylvia's brainchild, So she saw an opportunity with Academy of Management's, I believe it's called Special Project Fund or Special Initiatives Fund that she applied to. And with Judith's support, this idea was included in the proposal. So that really triggered everything. And she approached Nicholas and me. And, I got involved because really I love the topic, but even more than that, Sylvia is my dear friend and I will say yes, if she asks me. So that was that. But also, as we got together, so we started with this like 30,000 foot idea of, bringing impact scholars together. And we did a lot of dialogue and brainstorming around, okay, what this community can really do. And we realized that each of us are sort of frustrated with this idea that, junior scholars, like early career scholars, want to create impact, but we get no training in our PhD programs, or even working with senior scholars. In most cases, the sort of the apprenticeship training that you're getting is to, publish rigorous research. And so we saw that as a clear gap in how academia is set up. So the two phrases we were working with was capacity building and community building, and that was really scaffolding the idea of impact scholar community. So I really saw this as an attractive opportunity to help build these impact muscles in early career scholars. And, I was fortunate enough when I was a postdoctoral fellow at Ivy Business School, I worked at the Network for Business Sustainability with TIMA, and I got a chance to see how important it is to understand how we can really create impact. And so this was a way to institutionalize that experience, which otherwise would be sort of idiosyncratic to people or two, whoever comes across an opportunity like that. But the impact scholar community could really be this place for that kind of capacity building. And like I said, impact is a lonely journey often. So building a community around that is also so important.
Yeah, and I think you guys really leveraged the two best pillars that you could for this initiative, right? And capacity building and the community building, because my sense also is that maybe one of the reasons that many scholars do not pursue this impact role or this change agent role is because they simply have not got the skills to write in general media or social media, posts. Partly maybe a generational gap, or partly just feeling uncomfortable with putting stuff out there that isn't sort of fact-checked and cited, every other minute. And also this translation process, which I know you guys have been working on a lot. How do you translate your research into a digestible manner? Could you put your research on TikTok, for example, and how would you still communicate the key ideas for that? So I think this is really beneficial, that if you can build these skills within the people who are interested in creating impact, to give them the confidence also to pursue this, because it is a little bit daunting, like you mentioned, the COVID op-eds before that we, launched on the ONE platform as well when COVID first started. And it was clear to see that some people are a lot more comfortable with writing in this sort of very casual style than others, and there's a distinction there between what we know of scholarly writing and what is, accepted by the general public. And then in terms of community building, this goes back to classic concepts that we know about change agents and how being a change agent can be quite draining and quite isolating. And they need booster shots, as Jane Dutton would like to say in the positive organizational scholarship, right, or positive psychology. And one big part of providing this booster shot is this network of people around you who are like-minded, right? Who can support each other when, we want to kind of go down these paths that are a little bit unusual and not feel like we're the only ones out there that want to do so. So I think you guys really hit the nail on the head. I'm really glad you did.
Yeah, and I think I in each of the events that sort of we've organized, this idea of what skills would people take away, what insights would people take away has been so important. And I know that when sort of Sylvia was putting together the proposal, she was very clear that it should not just be about events and workshops. And so I think the next thing that this community needs to really think about is that how do we sort of take this energy of people coming together, sort of workshopy, skill building, and then really go out in the world to make change, and COVID has sort of kept us, in our sort of virtual worlds. So AOM, we are not meeting, but that would be an ideal way at AOM, maybe in 2022, to really think about, okay, with our hands and feet and brains, like how can we really create change through this community. So looking forward, I think that would be my hope.
Yeah, I think this is really great. And, it's been a theme, I think, for a while now. I remember when I first joined the ONE executive leadership team, and Gail Whiteman got up and said, urgency, urgency, urgency. And she posed the question, what is ONE doing, right, to combat climate change? And I think that also kickstarted this idea, okay, what should we be doing? I think we tried to build like a rapid response team, but that sort of faded out a little bit. And then when Sylvia and you guys came up with this idea, I thought, yes, this could maybe be something more institutionalized in a way, but still flexible and long lasting, with really kind of spurring a whole movement in this direction where you have people who are really engaged, and again, I mean, I already mentioned Andy's book, The Engaged Scholar, but also in there he talks about how can scholars be part of that engagement, and at what point is the right point to become engaged. I think many people still argue you should wait until tenure, but I really think, and this is a very personal view, but we spend so much time being educated and learning about our subject and becoming experts, and you do years and years of study. Why should you then wait another 10 years to apply that expertise, until you have tenure? I mean, it took me forever to get tenure. So, I felt like those years in between were really kind of lost and cold and clinical, because all that seemed to matter was research, and then I felt so disconnected and almost dispassionate about what I was doing, because it lost its meaning a little bit to some extent. So I think just by providing this purpose and meaning, this could really help the community as a whole.
Yeah. And before we move on, I do want to say that that's such a frequently heard phrase that you said about wait until tenure. And I just want to say that's another thing that I hope we can change the conversation through this community, because I think when people say that, they think about impact as this huge event that's going to happen right after you get your tenure letter. And but impact is a process, right? It's in every conversation you have with people outside academia, and it's in sort of how you orchestrate your research. It's in what you do. So I just want to put that out there too, that I hope we can also change how we understand impact and not make it this huge sort of North Star that is somehow going to appear, the clouds will part, and as we get our tenure. Yeah.
And I think you make an excellent point. And again, we've mostly focused on our research so far, but of course, one of the biggest way all of us have impact is through teaching, right? And one of the things I love about my new university, where I am now at the University of St. Gallen, is that the student body is super proactive on topics like sustainability, climate change, social issues. And they want also in their own teaching to have, the projects that they do for, the final projects or group project, they want those to have impact. So I have become really active in connecting my students with practical real life business problems and helping them think about solutions to those problems and report that back to the companies and engage them. And many of them have then afterwards gone into those companies to become interns and work even for free at many of these organizations because they're so passionate about it. And that has just given me this feeling like what I do somehow matters, maybe more almost than my research. And I think this is perhaps another dimension that we should not forget about, right?
So true. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, yeah. Would you like to take this one, Judith, about challenges? I feel like you have a broader perspective than probably I would have.
So what challenges do we currently see in scholarly impact creation, and how can they be overcome? Just asking me to find a silver bullet here. Of course, I mean, there are many challenges, and we already mentioned some of them. One is speed of publication, the time to publication, and you talked about nimble publication. I mean, I think this is a big problem, not only the speed to publication, but also the fact that we always analyze backwards because, of course, we have no data on the future, right? So we always have a hindsight and not really a forward-looking, anticipatory perspective of what will happen in the coming years. And yet, when we think about a topic like sustainability, this notion of a long time horizon is incredibly important, as Tima Bansel and probably yourself and many others have looked at. So we do need to have this forward-looking perspective somehow in there. I don't know how we can bring that in well into our research, but I think we need to be thoughtful about it when we frame our questions, and be a little bit creative about how we analyze them. We also talked about translation issues, right, of our research back to practice. I think this is still a big gap. Quite often, if we ask how many CEOs even know what the Academy of Management journal is, or even Journal of Business Venturing, or any of these journals, they would probably never have heard of them. The concepts sometimes use a lot of jargon, and nobody likes to kind of have to dig through a lot of jargon in order to understand something. So we definitely have a challenge there. We talked about the whole system of how we evaluate faculty and promote them, and on what criteria, and is impact included. But I wanted to also bring up one that we haven't maybe mentioned so much yet, and this is more about systems thinking, complexity, and interdisciplinarity of the work. I feel we still very much operate in these academic silos. We do management research, and we look at management models. How many of us work with natural scientists, with conservation biologists, maybe with politician or political scientists? To some degree, there's a little bit of that, but I feel like we could do a lot more in order to get a much more comprehensive understanding of all the factors involved that could affect, the future of the world.
Yeah. And I think both systems thinking and interdisciplinary work is so hard, but so rewarding. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I mean, I'm so happy you brought this idea of forward-looking thinking when it comes to research. And that's really where my heart is right now, in terms of like figuring that out, what that kind of research process looks like. And there's such a beautiful new essay in Journal of Management Studies by Julianne Reneke and her co-author, and I love the phrase they use. They talk about, as academics, as researchers, we have to not just predict the future, we have to create it with those, who we are studying. So this idea of looking way into the future, anticipating or thinking about something that has not even occurred, I think that is such an important problem and such an interesting problem for us to solve as researchers. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And I think your list is just fantastic. The only thing I will add is just sort of remind ourselves and everyone that we really need transformation and not only updates, and really, again, going back to the conversations Nicholas, Sylvia, and I've had about the role of this community, it's really encouraging or moving toward that sort of institutional transformation. And while on the way we make updates, but not losing sight of that. And I think RRBM is just sort of leading the way in that. And I want to share a quick example. So they're I think next week or week after, they have their annual summit. And I was on a call, like a facilitator planning call. And also on that call was somebody from AACSB, which is the Business School Accrediting Agency in North America. And she expressed on the call that this new change in accreditation, which includes impact in accrediting business schools, so research impact being one of the criteria, happened because of her participation in the last RRBM summit. And I was like, yes, that is a way we create institutional change, because once that criteria gets included, and it's going back to Judith, what you were saying, it's already happening in schools in Europe and other places. I think once that criteria is included, it gives the freedom for people or academics to engage in that kind of research. So I just wanted to sort of remind ourselves that we need that kind of transformation.
I'm so glad, Garima, that you brought up this word transformation, because I was just about to go there, although in a different direction. But I think first to build on what you said, this idea of us as scholars also becoming engaged in the dialogue around our own institutions and our own transformation is really incredibly important. And, I think about a year ago, I attended some kind of dialogue where someone from the Financial Times, who normally does these rankings, was involved. And we had a big debate also about sustainability and impact and student involvement and bottom up, top down, everything, and as a result of that, I saw small changes building on each other to the point where they're revising the FT50 journal list, for impact. So I think these kinds of dialogues are super important. And sometimes we might feel, this is not really our job, to be on these panels, and it's time consuming and you have to travel. But on the other hand, the amount of change or transformation that you can create by doing something like that is really, really incredible. In the same way that we are demanding that companies transform, right, to a business beyond usual, not just business as usual, and that we want CEOs to be activists. We need to be activists as well, and we can't just sit back and study the world, like scientists are sort of always thought to do. So I really think you've, again, really highlighted what it is that we should be doing. And if we do that, and we do it well, and we do it consistently, then things will transform little by little. We will create this change ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that would be a great segue into sort of our host for the future, which is our last question, I think. So maybe we can go there. So
maybe I should ask you, because you're the earlier career scholar, if I may say so. What are you most excited about the future of impact creation?
Yeah, I feel like I'm just in my such a warm bubble, hanging out with people like you and Katrin and Sylvia and Nicholas and lots of others. This growing community. So I'm very hopeful, and I'm going to share 3 out of what I'm most excited about. So the first is that, I really enjoy and appreciate, how innovative some of this co-creation research is. And, because my interest is there, I sort of stumble upon people, researchers, many of them early career researchers, sort of designing this co-creation process. And by co-creation, I mean, they fully involve, others outside academia, like practitioners and government and other people, as knowledge partners throughout their research process. And sort of, I think Heucher has this great article where he calls this withness thinking and not aboutness thinking. So I'm not just studying about managers, I'm studying with managers, So I just find that so exciting to see so many really creative designs that people come up with, and how to do that, this balance between sort of staying with our rigorous research, but also involving, others. I'm also hopeful from the openness from many journal editors that I've personally experienced and I've sort of heard about when it comes to writing about impact creation, and especially empirical work around impact creation, which is just so important in addition to commentary and in addition to opinions. And I think we're still quite a long way from top tier journals considering action research as credible. But I want to focus on sort of what's working. And I think what's working is really that people are able to publish empirical research around impact creation. And I just want to focus on that and encourage, others to sort of join this conversation so we can empirically figure out sort of how to do this stuff. And then the last thing I find exciting is that sort of early career scholars, such as in the impacts scholar community, are not hesitant to say that they care about impact. I think when I sort of step out of my warm bubble, there are most spaces where it might be looked down upon or dismissed. But I think I see these hundreds and hundreds, I think we're almost 600 strong now in impact scholar community, that, they don't hesitate from saying, yes, I care about impact. No, I don't want to wait until tenure, and really giving voice to sort of, caring about impact. And that's just so important. So those are the three things that come to my mind. How about you, Judith?
I mean, three amazing things, and I can only sort of comment on what you've already said, because I don't have any better ideas than those three, actually. But I really love all three, and especially the first one with the co-creation of the knowledge to get, with knowledge partners in practice or government or other types of stakeholders. I think this is incredibly, incredibly important. I often relay a story of when I was a PhD student, and I sort of had a bit of a argument with another PhD student about how they viewed the world. And then I asked them, well, did you ever speak to a manager? Because I don't think a manager makes a decision that way. And they said no. And then I felt like, well, there's my answer. You think you have this model that gives you a statistical significance and a little star, but you are not actually reflecting what's happening in practice at all. Because when I look at it at face value, it doesn't make any sense. And I feel like in Europe, again, perhaps this has been a bit more the tradition of combining relevance and working with practice at the same time trying to achieve this rigor, because I feel in the North American system, we have the rigor, right? And that's sometimes missing a little bit in some of the European scholarship. So if we can find that perfect blend, of both relevance and rigor, and not forgetting about practice, but also not forgetting about the scientific methods and the insights, and really being confident in our findings, I think that is incredibly important. We have to be able to do that. And then your last point about daring to care or being out and proud, I'm so happy to hear that, because when I was a junior scholar, I was definitely advised you do not mention impact. You even if you can possibly avoid it, try to avoid mentioning sustainability and say that you are a strategy scholar. And I kind of felt, well, what's the point? Why did I spend so much time investing in sustainability, and then I have to kind of, shop myself as a strategy scholar and put myself in this pigeonhole. And it definitely created some, obstacles in my way here and there for certain job applications, or even in certain communities, in my own communities at universities, where I was too much of an outsider, or the only one who did the work that I did. And so I'm really happy to hear that people are now standing up and saying, no, this is what I do, and this is what I believe in. And I feel that, I see this a lot in the younger generation, sort of teenagers, who just stand on their principles and refuse to budge. And I'm so happy to also start to see this in the scholarship and the more, up and coming scholars, because I think this will really create the change in the end. Because when you stick to those ideals, and you refuse to let go of them, then and you bring others with you, then there will be a little bit of a critical mass in that direction, and people will take notice. Yeah,
I love that. Mm-hmm. Well, I really don't have anything else to add, Judith. I think that's a great way to end. I think such a high point in terms of.
Well, they're your ideas, so I think your high point. But really, thank you for, again, for everything that you have done together with Sylvia and Nicolas. And thank you to Katrin for giving us this opportunity to chat about it. I was just really excited to know that this initiative is going on. And when the idea came forward, I immediately wanted to put all my effort behind it, because I feel like in some ways the Academy of Management has been slow to change, although faster now with COVID. But I think we've at the ONE really been trying to push the sustainability topic for so many years with Academy now. And I'm now starting to see it get embedded across different divisions, not just within ONE, you know, and I think that shows how far we've come.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And sort of, we are standing on shoulders of giants, right? So you and Andy and Chima and Gail.
I'm standing on the shoulders too.
So it's really been you sort of carving this path and making it easier, I think, for us to sort of talk like that, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we need to thank all of those people who came before us.
I'm so happy that you gave me my booster shot today. So I definitely feel more and more empowered and more part of the conversation again. And it was just a thrill to listen to you too. And I was nodding along a lot. So thank you so much for taking the time for the conversation today and for giving such inspiring and specific examples and answers. I'm sure the community is going to feel the boost like I do when they watch the video. So thank you both so much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, yes.